Hello, and welcome to Powertalk. I'm your host, Tom Power, and today we are honored to sit down with a true legend of Newfoundland media, journalist, broadcaster, actor, food critic, and now memoirist, Karl Wells. Karl has a decades-long career in broadcasting, including his time at CBC, and has become a household name here in Newfoundland and Labrador. His new book, Openly Karl, is a powerful and deeply personal memoir that opens the door on his life, his triumphs, struggles, and the journey of being an openly gay man in a time and place that wasn't always easy. So grab a coffee and join us as we sit down with Karl Wells. Karl, welcome to Power Talk. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. You've had a remarkable career in broadcasting. What first sparked your interest in media and storytelling?
Well, we have to go way back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, when I was about 4, 5, 6 years of age. There wasn't a lot of media back then. We had one television station, CJON. We had a handful of local radio stations. The CBC had a station here, of course, and then there was VOCM and CJON, VOAR, VOWR. But the primary stations in terms, I think, back then were CJON and VOCM. And I spent a lot of time by myself when I was very young. And once I figured out how to use the radio, we had this big 1950s piece of furniture, which included a record player and a radio. And once I had to turn that knob and tune in all of these different radio stations, it became my pastime. And television as well, of course, which I was very interested in and fascinated by. But radio was something about the sounds and the voices that I would hear on radio. You know, it's been said that radio is, especially radio drama, for example, is the theater of the mind. And that's true because, you know, if I was listening to somebody talk about New York or Hollywood or talk about beach palm trees, I could imagine all of this in my mind. And the words would take me there. The sounds would take me there. And I absolutely loved it. And so I kind of fell in love with the sound of voices. And on television, there was Don Jameson, who was a bit larger than life broadcaster. You know, Don had a big voice. He was a big man. And he was sort of the centerpiece of CJON television. And every night it was a family thing to sit down and watch News Cavalcade, which he hosted. And it was a news program, but it was also a weather program and an interview program. And he did commercials live. Everything was live. And I watched that nightly and became fascinated with him, and especially when he'd do the weather, you know, at the weather board, and he used actual chalk, and it was a blackboard type setup. I became hooked on media, I guess, at a very, very young age.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember your first time on air? And what was that moment like?
Yes, I do. I was 16 years old, and I went on the air on VOWR. I volunteered to be an announcer there, and I went on the air on a Thursday night, and it was hymn night, we call it. And they played hymns all evening. And I had to introduce all of these old-time gospel hymns, you know, How Great Thou Art, and all of those. And for a 16-year-old, it wasn't that exciting, but it being on the and I I was nervous, very nervous in the beginning. I sort of calmed down as the night progressed. It was a 3 or 4 hour shift. And after that first night, I thought, well, this is something I can do, and I'm better at it. And my goal to continue doing it and to get better and better and better and better.
Cool. You were a staple on CBC for years. How would you describe the landscape of Newfoundland and Labrador television when you were starting out compared to now?
Well, it was night and day really compared to now. And you know, back when I started, I don't think anybody would have imagined that the media landscape today would be what it is. I mean, back then, just think about it. There were no computers, there were no mobile phones, there were no iPhones, and there was no such thing as streaming or any of that. It was you know, linear broadcasting, radio, television. We had 2 channels to begin with. When I started, cable was in its infancy in Newfoundland. It started slowly and gradually got bigger and bigger. But originally, when I started, there was no cable. So there was some TV, there was CBC TV, and there were the radio stations. And because there was such a small, compact arrangement of stations, we had audiences. We had huge audiences. For example, when I was on Here and Now, I mean, we had well over 100,000 viewers, and you know, a huge, huge population of Newfoundland and Labrador watched that show. It may have even reached a 250,000 at one point. But anyway, the audiences were huge. Today, everything is fragmented. And today, linear broadcasting, the traditional stations, they're not watched as much because people have choice. And they have choice on their iPhone, they have choice on their smart TVs. You know, there's Netflix and there's everything else, and you get channels from all over the world. And so it's a very, very different landscape.
Yeah, yeah. Um, were there any local mentors, co-hosts, or producers who had a lasting impact in your early years?
Well, you know, when I started at the CBC, I started as a radio actor. And that sounds kind of antiquated, you know, because radio drama, for example, in the United States ended around 1959, 1960. But it continued with the CBC right up through into the 1990s. And when I started as a radio actor and a couple of radio drama producers, John Podester and John Holmes, actually, saw something in me, and they helped me a lot, you know, by casting me in various productions. But they were also great with lending advice. But I mean, they did think I was good and a competent actor, and that belief in me gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. So yeah, they would have been mentors. But then when I joined the CBC full time as an announcer, it was kind of you know, hit the ground running. I was hired as a professional announcer, and I was expected to be professional. And you know, if I made a mistake, I was told I made a mistake, and I was expected not to make it again. But that's not to say I didn't people who would lend advice if I asked for advice. I remember there were a couple of producers who were very kind to me. John O'Mara, another was Charlie Vitch, and a couple of announcers, actually. Richard Beaton was a great friend and always there when it came to lending advice if I needed it. So was Jeff Seymour was another one. So but for the most part, I mean, once I started, I was with a professional outfit, and I was expected to be professional.
Mm-hmm. So what's one on-air moment that still makes you laugh or cringe?
Well, Tom, there are a lot because when you spend 31 or 32 years at the CBC, you see it all. And I write about quite a few of them in the book, but one that stands out, I think, was the night that was both kind of frustrating and also very funny at the same time. And I made light of it while I was on the air, thank God. And I think people enjoyed it. But we used to use back then a weather map, a physical map, and it had a sheet of plexiglass over it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would write on the plexiglass with grease paint. Actually, it was makeup. It was clown makeup. Circus clowns wear this white makeup, and it was called clown stick. And I would use the stick of white makeup and write on the plexiglass board the temperatures. And the problem was, though, if the lights had been up in the studio for quite a while, this darn stuff would soften. And so I went on the air this night, and the minute I started writing in the temperatures, the stick started to break. Pieces would break off. And I would put it down, I'd get another one, a fresh one, and I'd do the same with one, and it would break. And I think I probably went through 3 or 4 sticks, and finally I said, to heck with it. I'm just going to tell you what the weather is. So that's what I did, but it was very funny at the time, and everybody got a good laugh out of it, and I heard about it for a long time to come from viewers.
Can you tell me what was the most challenging story you ever had to cover, emotionally or professionally?
Well, it was a tough story, but no, I wasn't directly involved in reporting on it, but it was February 15th, 1982, the Ocean Ranger disaster. And of course, at the time, I was doing the weather, but I was also anchoring the late night news. So it was certainly on my radar in the work that I was doing. But the overwhelming thing about it was the great sadness of it all, and the way it really rocked people throughout the province. And but at work, it got personal because we found out very quickly that a couple of our colleagues had relatives on the Ranger, and one of them was a friend of mine, and he was a news cameraman, and he was in the newsroom with us all that terrible day. And it was only I write about this in the book, by the way, but it was only later in the day that I found out that his son was on the Ocean Ranger,
Oh, wow.
and it was just devastating. It was heartbreaking. It was a very, very hard day, and of course it went on for days and weeks. It was just it was a rough time for Newfoundland and Labrador, and I suspect it had an impact across the country.
Yeah, I know. I had a couple of friends on it as well, so I know it impacted me very hard. Um, is there a particular interview or news moment that stands out as unforgettable besides the Ocean Ranger?
Yeah, yes. But it wasn't so funny for my guest, I guess, and it wasn't funny for me at the time. But I was interviewed. I did most of the interviews I did when I was on the CBC were live, especially when I was on Here Now doing the weather. I would go around and I'd do these community broadcasts and I'd interview people on the spot. And one night I was interviewing a guy. It was a minor hockey tournament, and He was very confident before we went on the air, and I had pre-interviewed him and told him what I was going to be asking him, and he said, "Oh no, no problem there. I'm a public speaker. I can handle anything." Uh, and so we went on the air, and I asked him the first question, and I could tell by the look on his face, he was just strict stage fright right away, and he couldn't say a word. Like he literally couldn't physically speak. And so I knew what was happening, and so I said, "Well, I think what you're trying to say," and I answered the question. But unfortunately, that's how the entire interview went. I'd ask him another question, and he still couldn't speak. And so I ended up cutting the interview short, and I threw it back to the studio. But that was very memorable, perhaps more memorable for him than me.
How did you manage the pressures of being in the public eye every night?
Well, um, as best I could. Uh, Doing television is interesting. A lot of us who work in television are very shy and don't do well when it comes to publicly speaking in a theater or to a group when there are actual eyeballs staring back at us. When you're doing television, you're looking at a camera and you're talking to an inanimate object. And you know that there's somebody beyond the lens watching you, perhaps thousands, but it's not the same as seeing actual people sitting in the front row, staring at you and saying, "Okay, come on, what have you got?" Um, um, so that's something that a lot of people who are work in television have to deal with. Some of us get good at being in public venues and speaking to large crowds, and other people just can't handle it. They prefer to stay behind the microphone or in front of the camera. But then there are other things. There are other things that pressurize you, for want of a better word. In my case, and I wrote about this in the book again. I have OCD, and it's now, thank God, uh, treated, and I actually take a medication for it. Not everybody does, and medication doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. That was something that caused me a lot of pain and a lot of stress because I didn't seek help until well into my career, and so that made my work life on days pretty miserable. But anyhow, there was that, and then of course there was the pressure that came from being a gay man and a well-known gay man working on television. I wasn't, announcing the fact that I was gay on the CBC. I couldn't anyway because I worked on a news program, and that wasn't, even remotely possible when I was working for the CBC. But everybody out there knew that I was gay, so I had to deal with a lot of abuse when it came to getting nasty letters and nasty telephone calls and things like that. But you know, I'm not the only one who had to go through things like that. I'm certainly not the only gay person who had to go through things like that. But times were different when I started out. When I was a little boy, homosexuality was illegal, you know, and so I grew up when I realized that I was different. I grew up wondering what would become of me because and the thing that most people realize is that uh, being gay is not a choice. You don't choose to be gay. You just are gay. That's who you are. And so when I started out, it was a different world altogether from what it is today. and the young, the millennials and Gen Xers and what have you. I mean, they or Gen Z, um, they didn't have to go through that. They may have to go through uh, something similar in the days ahead. Who knows? I mean, this is the thing, you don't know.
Mhm.
But I that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Actually, was so that younger 2S LGBTQ folks could get some kind of an inkling of what it was like in Newfoundland and Labrador back in my day, in the day of the baby boomers.
And actually, getting into your book, Openly Karl, is incredibly honest, heartfelt, and courageous. What made you decide now was the right time to tell your story?
Well, I had been thinking about it for a long time, actually. I was going back through some notes and I realized that I was actually making notes about what I might put in a memoir uh, back in 2019. So it's been percolating, let's put it that way. Um, and then I was encouraged by a couple of people that I respect who are writers who told me that I had a story to tell and that I should think about putting it all down on paper, writing a book. And so I did. I started out, and I'm not a fast writer, but I love writing, and so I every day I wrote, and eventually, after a couple of years, I had a manuscript and was lucky enough to have it accepted for publication.
Mm. And I have to say, it is a very good book.
Thank you.
Um, you talk about coming out in a very different time. How did that experience shape your personal and professional life? I know you already touched on it, but could you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, uh, in the beginning, I was pretty scared. I didn't know the decision I made pretty early in my life was that I was going to be open. I wasn't going to pretend I wasn't gay. I wasn't going to lie about it. Um, and I mean, when I was, excuse me, I'm going to have some water.
Go right ahead.
And when I you know, was in my 20s and got a job at the CBC, I I realized this was not a place where I could be open for various reasons. I ended up working in news, and you couldn't be political or an activist or anything when you worked for CBC News. You had to be completely neutral and objective, and so on and so forth. And so, but outside of the workplace, I was certainly going to be myself, and I was myself. And my husband and I now have been together for uh, going on 46 years, I think. And so we've always gone everywhere together, shopped together. We have many friends and we've lived together for 46 years. And so I've been a very open in my life. Um, and that's the way I wanted to live. But in terms of work, and I have to say, I did think about what I could do as a gay person to help, especially younger gay people. And I decided that the best thing I could do, because everybody knew I was gay outside of the CBC, and the people inside the CBC knew it too. But the best thing I could do, I thought, was when I'm on the air, because I did have a big audience. When I'm on the air, I can show people that um, the fact that I'm gay is irrelevant, that I can be as, I can be professional as a gay man. I can entertain them as a gay man. I can give them the news and be, as professional as the next person, just like my colleagues, and that in fact, gay people aren't any different than anybody else. We're all human beings, and we're all striving to do the best we can in this life, and that's all that's important. So I just wanted to be a good example, a good role model, I guess.
Mhm. You don't shy away from pain in the book, but you also bring out a lot of humor and joy. How important was it for you to balance the serious with the light?
Well, the serious stuff, the dark stuff that people experience in life. I mean, it's not something you plan on. It's just stuff that happens. Um, and what you have to do is try to get through it, but also you have to do your best to work at creating balance in your life, to counter the dark with the light, and you know make sure that you have moments where you can have a laugh, or you can enjoy the company of your friends. You can go to a movies, go to a comedy, and have a few laughs, and go to a party, go to a dance, or whatever, and create balance in your life that way. That's that's what i that's what i did.
Hmm.
That's what I recommend people do.
Yeah, yeah. So, what was the writing process like? Did anything surprise you as you revisited those moments?
um yes. I was surprised by the fact that I got so emotional when I was writing about the dark things that we were just talking about. And in fact, there were days when I was writing about this stuff where I had to stop writing and get up and get out of my office and just forget about it and try to get back at it the next day or a couple of days later. That was that. I didn't think it would affect me in that way, um, but at the end of the process, I have to say that it did give me some peace, and it was, as they say, a cathartic experience for me. So I'm glad that I went through it. I'm glad that I wrote about it, and you know, it's all laid out there. And when I started writing the book, that was what I was determined to do: tell the truth, be honest, but put it all out there.
Hmm. Now, getting into your career as a food critic, you became known
Hmm.
as a food critic and culinary writer. What drew you into that world after your career in broadcasting?
Writing, writing, writing. I love writing, and I had heard that the Telegram was looking for a food writer, and they had been doing focus groups or something, and they were told that one of the things that people would enjoy seeing in the paper was food criticism, restaurant reviews. Um, and as it happened, I had been writing restaurant reviews for mainland publication, an online publication, prior to getting the gig with the Telegram. And so I had already built up a little bit of experience doing this. And I sent them some of the reviews I'd written. And Russell Wingersky and Miller Eyre hired me to be one of their columnists. So that's how that started. But it was really the writing that drew me to it. I love writing, and I've been writing actually for a long time. In fact, I when I was very young, I had written a couple of plays, radio plays. One which was sold, and the other I almost sold, and you know, it was kind of in my blood. Um, and as far as food is concerned, food is something that is kind of in my genes anyway, because my father, before he started the business where that I grew up with, which was a grocery business, he had a grocery store. Prior to that, he was a professional cook, a professional chef, and his brother was a professional chef. And my grandfather on my mother's side was a chef, cooked for a living. So I kind of came by it honestly. It's just been food's always been an important part of my life.
What's one meal or restaurant experience that completely blew you away?
Well, it did blow me away, but it wasn't in a restaurant. I've had plenty of really good restaurant meals, but I remember when I was a teenager, um, we vacationed in we vacationed in Nova Scotia, and we were visiting my aunt and uncle who lived in farming country,
Mhm.
and they grew their own vegetables. They had a huge plot of land, and they grew every kind of vegetable you could think of. And they were into canning as well. You know, they'd can all this stuff for the winter months, but they grew a tremendous amount of vegetables. And one day, my aunt, I think she roasted a chicken, which probably came from one of the nearby farms, and she plucked up the vegetables from her garden, the carrots and the potatoes and everything else, and and she cooked a meal. So I was eating vegetables that an hour beforehand had been actually living in the ground, and I will never forget the taste of that meal. It was the first time I tasted vegetables, and the chicken too, for that matter, that tasted so rich and flavorful. And it was because of the fact that they, had been living just a short time before she cooked them. And it was an incredible experience. I'd never tasted anything like it before or since, to be honest with you.
You've also been involved in theater. This is how has performing and acting enriched your life?
Oh, well, it's it's really enriched my life because at my core, when you consider everything I've done over the years, it all kind of comes back to performance. Whether it's doing the weather on television or interviewing somebody or doing the news or, acting on radio, doing a monologue, creating a character, it all comes back to performance. And I think that is, at essence, who I am. That's what in essence, was meant to do, meant to be,
Hmm.
and so it's been very fulfilling, obviously.
Hmm. Do you ever miss studio life, or has writing become your new stage?
I'm always ready to do either or. Um, I I still have my hand into performance, if you will. I mean, I'm still doing a television show for Rogers Television, Karl Wells Point to Point, where I interview people, just as you're doing here. And I'm sure I'm going to write again. It may not be another book, but I'm sure I'll probably do the odd magazine article or something like that. And if interesting things come along, who knows what I'm going to end up doing. But I, I retired from the CBC, but well, I shouldn't say retired. I mean, I did my stint at the CBC and left and moved on. But there hasn't been a year since I stopped doing the weather, for example, that I haven't been doing something. I did a cooking show on television for 10 years, and this show that I'm doing now, it's in its eighth year. And I was writing newspaper columns for 14 years. So I've been a busy guy, and I'm not ready to stop yet.
You've blazed trails and opened doors for others. How do you hope your story will inspire younger generations, especially the LGBTQ plus youth?
I, you know, I, I haven't given that much thought. I'm just glad that a lot of people to this day tell me that thank me for what I did and that I was a role model for them. That when they were kids growing up, they knew they were gay, but they didn't have the courage to tell their parents or whatever. And the fact that they knew I was gay and watched me on television being who I was and being successful meant a lot to them, and that I was a real role model for them. That really warms my heart. I cannot tell you how much that warms my heart. And you know, if I was a trailblazer in a sense in that way, that's the I can't think of a better legacy.
Looking back, what would you tell your younger self just starting out?
I would probably tell my younger self to think about things a little more before jumping into something. There were times in my life when I really wasn't prepared to take on some of the things that I took on, and often felt that I was in over my head. And if I could go back, I would probably give it more thought, or maybe be more prepared for what I was about to get myself into. But the other thing that I regret is that even though I graduated from university with a couple of degrees, I was not a very good student. I wish that I had paid more attention to my studies, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of a good, solid education. And you have to, all through grade school, and if you go into technical college, or if you go to university or whatever, you have to give it your all, and you have to work hard and get the best education you can, because it will stand you in good stead later in life.
So, what's something people might not know about you that they'll be surprised to learn from reading your book?
I don't know, to be honest with you. People who read the book, and thank goodness a lot have already read it, um, um, have told me a lot of different things. I was surprised to learn this about you, or I was surprised to learn that, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's any one thing. I think people have to read the book and take from it what they will.
Hmm. Hmm. And finally, what does the future hold for Karl Wells? Any projects or goals in the future?
Nothing right now, except my television show, which I'm filming in later this summer, actually late August. I think we're filming about 12 or 13 interviews, and those will be broadcast through the fall and winter on Rogers TV. That's the main thing. And the other thing is, there's a number of things connected with my book that I have to do. Book signings and book festivals, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Well, Karl, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your journey with us.
Well, Tom, thank you very much. It's been wonderful having a chat with you.
Openly Karl has been more than a memoir. It's a roadmap of courage, authenticity, and resilience. For those of you watching, you can find Openly Karl wherever books are sold. Support local if you can. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more inspiring interviews right here on Power Talk. Thanks again to Karl Wells, and thank you all for watching. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.